Hello YouTube, it's Lane here with Hobbies of Man once again, and it's time for our monthly ramble video where I sit down and off the top of the head kind of just talk about a specific topic that I wouldn't really feel comfortable kind of making into a proper video because I really don't want to do the research necessary to make it a good, proper, well-made video, right? So it's basically me being lazy, but also me wanting to have videos that are just conversations so that we can kind of develop our community via just me talking without a specific goal in mind. In this case, I'm going to be talking about the big two in terms of comic books and whether or not it's really worth reading them if you're a beginner or a new person trying to get into comic books at this current time. So yeah, it's actually a pretty difficult topic, and I think it's important to kind of mention that I'm always been into comic books, right? Sorry, I spit all over myself. I've always been into comic book heroes, but I've never really been into comic books until recently, until a couple years ago. I mean, technically speaking, I did have about 10 different collected editions of different comic books over the years. I had Superman Year One, the Earth One. Superman Earth One. I can't remember if it was Year One or not. I also had the Green Arrow Year One. I had a few different New 52 Justice League and Superboy titles, and once I started collecting manga, I also started collecting comic books. I bought New 52 Aquaman, and then I moved to this apartment and started going to my local comic book shop to buy single issue comic books, floppy comic books, right? So I've only been into the comic book hobby for about a year and a half or so, right? But I've grown up watching Arrow and the MCU and a bunch of animated shows, and so I know a lot of the characters and have seen a lot of YouTube videos about the characters over the years. I just have not really engaged with the comic books until the last year and a half. And over the last year and a half, I've realized that really there is no point in DC or Marvel comic books as a newbie because, well, everything is difficult to get into, and specifically for DC, everything just reboots every couple of years. I don't know exactly why, but there's a lot of people out online that can tell you a bunch of a billion different reasons why this happens. Some of them are saying that it's to boost sales because once you restart, you make those new those new number one issues valuable because they're for like speculators, for people that are into the comic book hobby for the money. It's also because they're trying to push new agendas, which I don't necessarily subscribe to, but like for DC and Marvel lately, it definitely does seem like they are skewing towards providing specific types of ideologies that I generally agree with, but I don't really like the way they're handled in these comic books because it's just over the top, hitting you in the head with it. And then there's also a bunch of other people that are saying that there's just moral and ideological bankruptcy in these companies, and all of this type of crazy shit. It doesn't really matter. The point is that DC specifically reboots their universe every 2 years, and it basically makes it so that the previous set of continuity, which you might have gone into recently, doesn't really matter anymore, right? And technically speaking, hey, it mattered one time, it'll always matter to you directly. But I mean, part of the fun of reading comic books is keeping up with the story and understanding the canonicity of it and moving through that story, right? The only DC comic books that I collect are the ones that are out of continuity, that are like mini events, series, or specific things that I find interesting. I collect the Titans United runs because I like the Teen Titans team that they have, or the Titans team that they have. And it also is vaguely connected to the Titans TV show, which I have not seen, don't care to see, but I still like the lineup and the kind of ideas presented. I also like the artwork, and I collect Tom Taylor's Elseworlds type stories because I think that Tom Taylor is a pretty good writer in those stories. I don't know if he's a good writer in the continuity stuff. At least I've heard that he's not. But Deceased, Dark Age, Dark Knights of Steel, all of that stuff is good. I enjoy it, and so I'm gonna buy it, right? Nothing else from DC. I'll buy some of the out of continuity Batman stuff, because Batman is cool, and there really is nothing else to say. Batman is awesome, right? So, yeah. But anything mainline that's coming out, I've picked it up, I've read it, and I've generally not enjoyed it very much. So there really is no reason for me to collect that. I really don't think that there's really any reason for other newbies into the comic books to collect DC or Marvel titles that are not already collected in trade paperbacks or hardcover editions or anything like that, because most of the new stuff that's coming out is going to get reset all of the time, and it's not going to be really enjoyable because you're going to have that hurdle that at one point in your collecting journey you're going to have to deal with the fact that it resets, and it's not really like fun to deal with that. So yeah, now in terms of Marvel, I just feel like there really isn't anything being offered from Marvel that is worth your time as a reader. Most of the stories don't really seem interesting to me, and realistically, most people that like Marvel heroes don't really like comic book versions of those heroes. They like the movie versions of those heroes, and you're not going to find the movie versions of Iron Man and Captain America in the Captain America comic books or the Iron Man comic books, because they're not the same. It's very different. I don't know how to explain it, but it's not the same thing. You're not going to find what you're looking for. The only stuff that might be worth it is Spider-Man, but even Spider-Man I feel like is not that good. So yeah, like I'm not saying necessarily just because of this of the way the stories are written or structured. It's just like I feel that most people my age, 20-ish year olds, and slightly younger or slightly older, are more or less in love with the idea of superheroes from the Infinity Saga era of the MCU. We don't really care too much about the other heroes or anything outside of that. And it's really difficult to watch these movies and then go to the comic book shop and try to pick up a title based on the characters that you know from these movies, and then realize that they're nothing alike. And it's kind of disheartening, and kind of sours your experience a bit, which happened to me quite a few times, actually. Some of the things that were interesting, though, are Moon Knight, because I read that before I watched the show, and so I had a defined version of the hero from the comic books that was already going to be different from the show, so I could separate those a lot better. And also Eternals. I found the Eternals mythology interesting, and I picked up a few different one-shots from what's his name, Gillian, that I liked. But the Eternals movie didn't do that well, so it's probably very unlikely that Eternals is ever gonna come back to the MCU at any point. So maybe Eternals is a good thing to pick up as well. But everything else that is MCU-esque, you're probably not gonna have a very fun time reading it. Spider-Man is probably your best bet. X-Men might be your best bet too, for a while at least. But from what I've seen about those comics, I don't think they're very good. So I don't know. But what should you pick up if you can't pick up from the big two? I think both of them are more or less just situational things. I mean, a lot of people might care, a lot of people might not. I personally find these reasons that I listed above not reasons why I don't really pick up Marvel or DC books. If you see, most of the stuff that I pick up is probably Image, a bit of Dynamite, and a little bit of Vault here and there as well. And the reason for that is because these three comic book companies publish things that are not necessarily owned by only one person, because a lot of Dynamite stuff is not, but they usually have a very clear start point, and their end point is whenever the series ends for that character or for that universe, right? So Spawn is the more classic superhero. He has a beginning point, and given that there's only 300 issues and all of them are more or less in continuity, you could actually catch up and then start picking up single issues after that. There was also a pretty recent entry point, which is pretty good, with the King Spawn stuff. But it's still young enough that it's relatively easy to go back and and follow up with all of the Spawn stuff. If you don't really care about the mainline hero stuff, which, you know, excludes Spawn and Invincible and all that stuff, there's a bunch of new stuff that's coming out that is superhero-esque. I mean, actually, it is superhero stuff, but is more in line with like more Japanese style superheroes. So like Tokusatsu Power Ranger stuff, the Massive Verse with Kyle Higgins at the helm is part of Image. You can pick that stuff up. It's pretty good. And if you don't really care about superhero stuff, Image and Dynamite and Vault have a bunch of fantasy and sci-fi stories that have nothing to do with superheroes that are still comic books that are still really enjoyable, and all you have to do is find when the first issue is going to come out and start collecting it from there. And that's really what I recommend you guys do. Look up Vault, look up Dynamite, look up Image, and start picking up comic books from them instead of DC and Marvel, because, well, I think they're more enjoyable. Of course, it's all dependent on personal preference. If you like DC and Marvel and you want to only read DC and Marvel, go ahead and do that. Do whatever you think is best. Do whatever you think is going to be most enjoyable for you on your collecting journey and in your hobbies, right? But for me personally, I think that DC and Marvel are not really the move when it comes to being a new, you know, member of this community, a new person into this hobby and trying to get into it, because you're just going to be disappointed pretty often, a lot. And so it's just better to avoid that issue as long as you can, get into the other companies first, and then branch out to the older, more established titles, because, well, most of them have like over 600 issues of history, and there's a lot of baggage every time you try to pick up a title from any of those characters, right? So it is what it is. Go for Image if you want traditional superhero stuff, but also a lot of fantasy and crime type series. Go for Dynamite if you like pulp heroes from the 1920s, you know, John Carter of Mars, Sheena, Vampirella, you know, those types of characters, Barbarella, all of those like old school, like pulpy characters. Go for Dynamite if you want that. And Vault if you want kind of more modern, like adult themed kind of just general things. Most of the stuff they have is actually sci-fi and fantasy. The thing that I recommend the most is Barbarian, but basically any title that they're releasing is probably going to be pretty good. So I definitely recommend you guys check out Vault. Of course, there's AW Upshot, I think, is the other company that is also pretty interesting. I don't really know too much about them. There's also a bunch of IDW things if you want TMNT and Transformers, Power Rangers. You can go to Boom. And, you know, there's a bunch of other, you know, indie, smaller publishers that are, in my opinion, much better for beginners than just jumping into DC and Marvel, because they're just more enjoyable. So, yeah, that's my off the top of the head, very unscripted and unplanned ramble video for the month. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.